How's it, guys? Welcome to the jewelry making video part 1, where we'll be creating the wax form. Hope you guys enjoy the video. We'll be doing parts 2 and parts 3 at a later date. In the meantime, keep your eyes open for the upcoming video, which is going to be a 3D printed drone build, and we'll see you at the end. I'm your host, Drayden Besaidenote. Today we're going to be covering the basic process of creating a wax form for a lost wax casting method. The things you need are on the screen, and we're going to discuss them in a little bit more detail. This is my electric wax knife. You can see it's very banged up, but they last almost forever, and if you're going to be doing a lot of this, I recommend getting one of these. If you're just trying it out, a normal metal tool and a gas burner or even a methylated spirits burner works perfectly. You can just heat your implements and use them while they're hot. These are the metal implements that I use. You can see some of them are quite improvised. Others are just standard dental waxing tools and some manicure tools. Really anything you have will work as long as it's got a bit of a sharp point. You could probably get away with kitchen implements if you really needed to. These are the stones we had to choose from. I wasn't sure at the time that I started filming which one I was going to do. I ended up picking the one to the top left. It looks a little bit redder than the rest. Yeah, that'll be the stone we'll work with. You'll see it a little bit more closely in a second. This is an optional step. Dopping is a process where we stick a stone to a little wooden post just to make it a little bit easier to handle. You just stick it with some sealing wax, but we'll go through the process. I'll demonstrate shortly. Then just some standard sculpting wax. This is dental wax, but you get jewelry sculpting wax and dental sculpting wax. Pretty much any sculpting wax will do. Even some candles will probably work. It's worth experimenting with if you have a few different types lying around. Then just a pen and a pencil for marking. I ended up not using either of these because they weren't showing up on camera, so I just grabbed a marker. This is going to be kind of an optional step. I do this just to help me get a sense of scale for the overall piece. How much stone will there be compared to metal? But I probably won't end up obeying all of these lines. I don't normally obey all of these lines. These are the supplies you'll need for the dopping process. Just a lighter, some sealing wax. Mine has been melted into a container because I reuse it. A dowel or an old pencil, and then the stone that you're planning to mount. Okay guys, be very careful when you're using this wax. It does burn very easily, and it'll burn you very badly. It's easier if you buy it in stick form as it's sold, because then you know that you can just light the wick and drip it onto the stone and onto the pencil. The basic principle is make sure that the stone and the pencil are both coated with wax that is still liquid. Press them together, and then this step where I'm just tidying it up is sort of optional. This is not an optional step. Do not skip this. You will never get that cap off of that stone if you do not put the dish soap on it. This is just a thin layer of dish soap covering most of the stone. You can go down quite far because, like I said, I don't always obey my lines. And the soap doesn't harm the stone in any way. The next step is just to apply a thin, even coat of wax. I'm going to start on one side. Just add a thin layer to try and capture the surface geometry of the stone, to ensure that the fit of the cap is as close to optimal as what we can get it. Some of these caps, if the stone's geometry is complex enough, these caps will actually be press fit. You can press them on there and they'll never come off. Otherwise we just use a little bit of epoxy to hold them down. At this point you'll be able to see, and it's not so obvious on camera, but you'll be able to see in real life where the thin spots are. The wax stays kind of more translucent in those areas, generally on the high spots, ridges and crests and those type of things. Just go back and put a second layer of wax over the thinner spots to ensure that you have a nice even coverage. didn't mention the toothbrush in the what you might need section, but it is optional. It's basically just used as a little broom, just sweeps away kind of the fluffy bits that we're going to create while we're carving. This step involves just trying to even the edge out, take away any jaggedness that I'm not intentionally trying to achieve, and then we're going to press the cap, just lightly with the edge of the tool. There and there. And that cap should come right off. Be careful when you do this because they are very fragile. Use very little pressure, as little as you can, to remove the cap. Make sure you remove it all the way, don't just trust that it's loose. Take it off, put it back. This is going to be the inlay perimeter. I'm going to do 2 perimeters around the outside of this cap. There's going to be a small inlay perimeter in between them. Don't be surprised if this process seems harder when you're doing it yourself. But don't be scared of wax, guys. You can always add and you can always take away. If you take your time, you can get this just the way you want it. At this point I'm just going to close up and even out that top section because there's now another perimeter above and I don't feel like using that top section for an inlay this time round. I'm going to just fill it with wax, which will eventually be metal, and what you're seeing as the green will be the inlay and the white will be the metal in the final design. For this, you guys may need to improvise a little. This is a dental sheet wax, and if you can get it in your area, that's great, but you're going to use very little of it and you're going to need to buy it in bulk. Important step here is, you'll see in a second, I'm going to go in there, there we go. I'm going to go in there with my tool and seal those perimeters down all the way around each of those connection points to make sure that there are no gaps. This is because any gaps might hold investment material later, and that could lead to a miscast, which would mean starting everything over again. This is an optional step. I like going in and just tidying up the edges of my inlay to make sure that the shape of the inlay is exactly what I want. You'll see sometimes I cut a piece away or carve a piece out. Just trying to get a nice profile visually. This is really a matter of preference. We're demonstrating more the process than style. So whatever you're carving, do what you think needs to be done to achieve the shape and profile that you're trying to achieve for your piece. See there, I'm removing a little bit more because I didn't like how narrow it was there. Just creating that nice inlay, making sure that the shape of that inlay is what I want it to be. Don't worry if that happens, just pick your cap up, put it back on your stone. If it does begin to get too loose to work with, you can simply just seal it back down to the stone by inserting a hot implement between the stone and the wax at intervals around the perimeter. This is the final piece, at least the final wax form. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to continue this and other pieces in the following video where we're going to discuss sprueing in preparation for casting. Hit the buttons. We'll see you guys soon.